Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no doubt the vast majority, probably every single member and right honourable member in this House, is sympathetic with the underlying motivation of this bill, which is to ease suffering in others and to try and avoid suffering where possible. And for the most part, this debate, both in this chamber and in committee, has been good-natured and conducted in a way that I think we can be proud. There has been, of course, more widely, questions about the motivations, both of those who are proponents of the bill and of those who oppose the bill. And whilst this is not about any individual one of us, I think it's only fair, because some questions are asked, I want to put a few things on the record about my own position on this. I do not come at this from a religious point of view. I'm an atheist, I'm a humanist. So this is driven by my concerns about the practicalities of this bill rather than any religious viewpoint. And it has been suggested, particularly when people talk about the experience they have had talking to people who have lost loved ones or who are themselves terminally ill, that if you had seen, I've had this said to me on a number of occasions, if you had seen someone suffering, you would agree with this bill. Well, Mr. Speaker, I have seen someone suffering. My closest friend earlier this year died painfully of esophageal cancer, and I was with him in the final weeks of his life. So I come at this not from a position of faith, nor from a position of ignorance, and I would hope the House would take those factors into consideration when I say what I'm about to say.
Jim
Thank you for giving way. And on the TV last night, they did a survey of doctors, GPs, and the relationship between the GP and the patient is incredibly close. Your children come into the world, your grandchildren come into the world, your GP's involved. But whenever the GP has to deliver a diagnosis of terminal illness to the patient, it's not just the fear in the eyes of the patient, it's the fear in the eyes of the GP and the doctor, the friend we all have. And does he, right on remember, does he recognise the importance of this debate today and this vote, because it will change forever that relationship of trust between the GP and the patient in a negative way that will never change ever again.
James Cleverly.
I mean, I will make reference to the broad point that he makes later on in my speech, and I would say I'm going to try not to take too many interventions, because many people have not had the chance to speak in this debate, and I want to give them the chance to do so. At the second reading debate, I made the point that we need to think about the detail of this bill and not just vote in accordance with the broad principles. I made the point that because it was a private member's bill, the opportunity to fundamentally change the bill is limited. So we have an enhanced duty to get it right first time. We were told at second reading that a lot of the concerns, a lot of the worries, a lot of the detailed questions would be resolved through the committee process. We were promised the gold standard, a judicially underpinned set of protections and safeguards. Those protections did not make it through committee. And I've also heard where people are saying, well, there are still problems, there are still issues, there are still concerns that I have. Well, the Lords will have their work to do. But I don't think it is right, and none of us should think that it is right, to subcontract our job to the other place. We are making an incredibly important, a fundamental change, as the Honourable Member for Strangford highlights, a fundamental change in the relationship between medical professionals and those they serve. And if we make that change, we will introduce perhaps only a small but a permanent question mark in the minds of every patient, particularly a patient that is discussing a serious injury, a serious illness, or perhaps a terminal diagnosis. What is this medical professional expecting of me? What are they thinking? Where are they? Where is their head? Rather than the situation we have at the moment where that patient knows that that medical professional is duty-bound to do no harm, to preserve life and dignity wherever possible. And that subtle change, will you forgive me? No, go on.
Dame Siobhan McNaught.
On Tuesday, it is the second anniversary of my sister's death. 3 weeks prior to her death, we took her to hospital because she had a blood infection. And in spite of agreeing to allow her into intensive care to sort out that blood infection, the consultant decided that she shouldn't go because she had a brain tumour and she was going to die. She was going to die, but not at that moment. I'm sure Mr. Speaker can understand that a very big row ensued. I won that row. She was made well, she came home, and she died peacefully. What does the honourable gentleman think would happen in identical circumstances if this bill existed?
James Cleverly.
She asked me to speculate into a set of circumstances which are personal and painful, and I suspect she and I both know that the outcome could have been very, very different, and the moments that she had with her sister, just like the moments I had with my dear friend, those moments might have been lost. So as I say, we have got to recognise that this is an important moment, and whilst I respect the Honourable Lady, I disagree with her assessment that it is now or never, and it is this bill or no bill.
Yeah.
And that a vote against this at third reading is a vote to maintain the status quo. None of those things are true. No. There will be plenty of opportunities, and indeed we are duty-bound, I think, stimulated by this debate, which is why I don't criticise her for bringing it forward, stimulated by this debate, to have a serious conversation about palliative care, a serious conversation about how we get to that. And I know that many people will say, oh, these are not conflicting or contradictory positions. But we also know, and I'll come upon this in the speech, I'm going to crack on because otherwise I'll get told off by Mr. Speaker. We know that there will be circumstances where assisted dying will be on a statutory basis and provision of palliative care will not.
Yeah.
And so, and we also have to address the point that, look, we can all pray in aid of individuals and institutions to reinforce our positions on this. But as I say, we can't subcontract our decisions. And yes, we can fish around for people to come up with the perfect quote that reinforces our arguments, but another 5 minutes on Wikipedia or on Google or with friends of ours in the medical profession will find another voice that opposes that. So yes, it is a mixed picture in the medical professions, but I am struck by virtue I'm struck by the number of professional bodies which are neutral on the topic of assisted dying in general, but are opposed to the provisions within this bill in particular. And we can't just say, oh, well, they are neutral on assisted dying, so therefore this particular vehicle has to progress. Because we carry a responsibility. It's what we are sent here to do. And we need to take it very seriously. And we must be rigorous on the specific details in this bill. And just like the Honourable Lady, I don't have time to go through every single argument that was had through committee, second reading and beyond. But to ensure that we are rigorous, I think there are three fundamental questions that we should ask ourselves. Not lean on our friends and colleagues, but ask ourselves and ensure we answer fully and honestly. Firstly, and then
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way on that point, and he'll remember in 2021 he and I worked cross-party in terms of identifying the inequalities within certain communities and getting them to come forward with the issue around the COVID vaccination. Does he agree with me that one question we as parliamentarians need to ask ourselves, how is it right that some communities are not denied basic healthcare within the current system? How is it right that some communities don't have access to good palliative care? How is it right that some communities still have a mistrust of the medical profession? And how is it right that we are not listening to their voices?
James Cleverly.
The Honourable Lady makes an incredibly important point. I will touch upon that briefly in the points. I'm not minded to take more interventions because otherwise I will steal time from others. So 3 questions we need to ask. Firstly, are we happy, not for this principle, but for this bill as drafted to become law? And there are many elements that I've already discussed are concerning. Within the criteria set out, medical professionals do not need to seek deeper motivation. We've said there is not a real choice between palliative care and assisted dying because one will have a statutory underpinning, the other will not. That, as I say, gold standard of protections were lost during the committee process because a number of professional bodies, and I will need to make space, a number of professional bodies have said they do not have the capacity, they do not have enough people to fill the slots that this bill demands of them. Secondly, in terms of fundamental changes, are members and right honourable members genuinely happy to write the blank cheque that this bill demands? Because it is normal for the Secretary of State of a government department to decide when a piece of legislation comes in force. And they make that decision based on the state's ability to deliver that legislation. Commencement dates matter. They are not just some arbitrary date on a piece of paper. And I understand the desire of people to make sure that this can't be kind of lost in the down the back of the sofa when it comes to government work. But when people upon whom we rely to deliver this say they are not ready and they don't feel they will be ready, they don't have enough people, they don't have enough capacity, they will have to take resource from current provisions to move across to this provision, which will be driven by a statutory requirement and a locked-in commencement date, we should listen. We should listen. And if the people who are going to make this work and work as well as we hope it will if it becomes legislation, say that they are not confident that they can make it happen, we should be very, very careful about demanding that they prioritise this. And that's what this legislation says. They prioritise this above any other work that they might otherwise do. And thirdly, and the Honourable Lady hinted at this, and I mentioned this in an intervention at earlier stages in this bill, when it comes to things like coercion, or when it comes to actually the pressure that individuals put on themselves, when it comes to medical professionals raising this issue, we know there are inequalities in health provision already, none of which I think will be addressed by this bill. But the point I've also made is we know there are certain communities and certain people within those communities, particularly women, who are overly deferential both to men and men in authority. And if we can genuinely say that we have no fear whatsoever that a potentially vulnerable woman will sit in front of a medical professional who raises assisted dying, and even without implying it is the right thing for her to do, the very fact that they bring it up will have a significant influence on that woman's thinking. So we cannot believe, as it stands at the moment, that this will have a completely neutral effect across all communities. This will be the last intervention.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. We've put safeguards into the bill that mean there is a panel that looks at those issues and will ask questions like, has your doctor persuaded you to do this? Do we honestly think that someone who is a social worker or who is a psychiatrist or who is a lawyer is totally incapable of finding coercion. That is exactly what that panel is there to do, and that is exactly what those safeguards will provide.
Sir James.
The Honourable Lady makes an important point, but I refer her to the question 2 that I put. Those bodies say they don't have the people to populate those panels. And yet they are demanded by the commencement date. So the fact is that the principle of having someone or a group of people protect against coercion is important. The idea, and I'm not just talking about coercion, I'm talking about how people perceive the question of people in authority. But the fact is, royal colleges, social workers have told us they don't believe they will be ready to put those guardrails in place by the commencement date, and we should listen to them. And Mr. Speaker, I will finish on this point. This is an important debate. It has stimulated an important conversation, and it is a conversation that demands our full attention. But I do not believe this bill is ready to go to the other place. And it is interesting that there are both proponents and opponents of this bill who are hoping the Lords will make significant changes to the bill. And that should set off alarm bells, surely. And then, Mr. Speaker, the final point. The final point is that ultimately, because this is such a fundamental change, we do need to make sure that we have that enhanced level of scrutiny about the detail of this bill. And I do not believe that, even though, like all of us, we want to avoid suffering and alleviate suffering wherever possible, I do not believe we've had the opportunity to get this bill into a right shape, which is why I will be opposing this third reading, and I encourage others to do likewise.